41 days, 19 hours, and 41 minutes. That's over 1,000 hours, 1,003 to be precise. Over the past year, I've spent that much time within the world of Final Fantasy XIV, and honestly, it's kind of hard to believe. It's already been just over a year since I first played the game, and in that time, I've spent over 1,000 hours of my life within its world, and you know what? I don't regret a single second of it. My first MMO experience has taken up about a tenth of my life in the past year, and here I am acknowledging that and not falling into a perpetual state of self-loathing. Now, that's an accomplishment. Over the past year, my boredom has been killed and my mental health has actually been preserved during a year that was a horrible joke that keeps getting worse even to this day, and it's all thanks to the game. Well, kinda. There have been a few things that have driven me to the brink of insanity. I swear to God, one day I'll roll above a 25 on the Emerald Gwibber. One day. But while all of my hours in Eorzea may not have been all sunshine and lollipops, the vast majority was. And even now I still find myself with a mountain of new things to do ahead of me. I guess that's the advantage of starting a game a decade after it's released. And on top of that, I also have a whole new anchor and commitment to the game that making videos for it provides. Something that has kept me from burning out and introduced me to a lot of new people, which I am very grateful for. Of course, if you spend enough time within a game, especially an MMO, you'll have stories to tell from that experience, and of course I am no different in that regard. And while I may have chronicled many of those adventures, though more often misadventures, in various videos of mine, today I will be telling one that is far broader and more meaningful to me than smaller tales of my static dying in 2 weeks, losing everything in Ishgard, or entering jumping puzzle hell. Today I will be going over my experience throughout my first 1,000 hours of Final Fantasy XIV, from how I got into the game, my thoughts on the experience provided for new players, stories of my adventures and interactions with other players, and what I enjoy about the game and what I think can be improved. It's been a long road to get here, and this is a video I've looked forward to making for quite some time now. So let's get into the thick of it. As always, my name is Lokidum, and this is 1,000 Hours of Final Fantasy XIV, Tales of a No Longer New Player. So, of all of the MMOs out there, why exactly did I choose to get into Final Fantasy XIV as my first MMO? Well, to put it simply, the free trial lasted longer than WoW, and the game hooked me in faster than WoW did. Of course, it isn't exactly that simple, and there is more to that choice. My interest in MMOs was sparked after watching Sword Art Online, and no, I wasn't deluded into thinking a random nerd like myself would suddenly accumulate a harem of girls fawning over him in an online world. Instead, I was intrigued by the idea of venturing through a vast online world and working together with many other players to overcome challenges, and doing all of this in a high fantasy setting which appealed to the formerly bookworm side of me. So I did some research and found out just how much time MMOs normally take to play and went, you know what, I think I'll pass for now. But then a month later, the pandemic hit and I no longer had a reason to leave my house, and after playing through a bunch of my backlog and ending up with nothing else I wanted to play, suddenly the time commitment required to get into MMOs didn't seem like as big of a deal. So I started doing research about the different MMOs available and compiled a long list of them from giants like World of Warcraft to smaller games like Albion Online, with some games I didn't even know existed and have pretty much forgotten their existence since, like Soul Worker and Adventure Quest 3D. But after this list of around 50 or so different MMOs was completed, I tried to determine a good place to start. And in the process, managed to overwhelm myself with the sheer amount of games there was to try, and proceeded to not, well, try a single one of them for over a month. But then May of 2020 rolled around, and I finally started going down the list. I already owned and had dabbled before in the Elder Scrolls Online and Black Desert Online, and after dabbling in them once more, I remembered why I had failed to get into them in the first place and dropped them once again. From there, I moved on to try PSO2 and Terra, and let me just say, the former is far superior to the latter in that case, but I still failed to get into either one of them. Then I moved on to the two true titans of the MMORPG space, World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV. First I tried WoW, expecting that to be the game that I would be sucked into for many reasons I won't outline here. But that was pre-level squish and on a double EXP weekend at that, so I hit the free trial cap in under 5 hours and I hadn't even left the starting zone. Yeah, I wasn't about to give a game a bunch of money after a very short and very mediocre first impression. But after failing to get into WoW and the other games I had tried, I had started to think, you know, maybe MMOs just weren't for me. And maybe I would be better off just going back to single player games or just pass the time in the pandemic by putting myself into a self-induced anime coma and waiting for the storm to blow over. But at that point, I had already installed the free trial of Final Fantasy XIV, so I decided that would be my last shot at getting into MMOs. And if that one didn't stick, I'd just simply move on with my life. Well, judging by the title of this video, you can probably tell what happened. Despite the first few hours playing like a fucking visual novel, the city of Ul'dah and the beautiful desert of Thanalan made me want to keep exploring, and before I knew it, I found myself invested and intrigued by the game's narrative and world as I explored every zone I could get access to and did all the quests that I could find. Especially kill quests, as I was really enjoying Gladiator. Within just a few days, I hit level 35, which was the free trial cap back when I first played the game, and immediately I found myself reaching for my wallet to buy the game. And it was then I realized how deep I had truly fallen into the game. So, why exactly did I choose Final Fantasy XIV? Well, as cheesy as it sounds, it kinda chose me. No other MMO I tried managed to sink its teeth into me, yet 14 almost immediately grabbed me and pulled me into the game's world, and even a year later has not yet let me go. If you want my more detailed first impressions, I made a video focused on that pretty soon after I first played the game. It's an old video, so it's a bit lower quality, but I still agree with most of what I said. The journey from level 1 to 80 is a long one, often taking well over 100 hours on a fresh character. Best part? They get to advance another 10 levels in a few months thanks to Endwalker! Until they eventually lose a bunch of levels at the inevitable level squish in a few years. Fun. Leveling in Final Fantasy XIV is certainly an undertaking for both new and old players of the MMORPG genre, and leveling up to endgame in 14 takes quite a while compared to its main competitors. You see, I could play other games and grind mobs and uninteresting quests for about 20 hours to get to the fun stuff in the endgame, or play 14, which is basically 4 60-hour JRPGs strapped to each other to unlock the MMO. Yeah, I think I'll take the JRPG any day. What can I say? I'm an RPG guy. Make that 5 JRPGs come Endwalker though, don't want to forget about that one. But jokes aside, leveling in 14 was very different compared to what I was expecting from an MMO. I was expecting to be running around a field killing trash mobs for no other purpose than a local farmer told me to. Instead, I was running around in a field killing trash mobs not only because a local farmer asked me to, but because it's part of a larger story. And I was not expecting anywhere near the quality of the story that is in 14, and it managed to carry my interest quite easily through the uninteresting gameplay from level 1 up through around 40. At first, I was fine with the 3 or 4 abilities I had on Gladiator / Paladin since I was just learning MMO combat for the first time. But when I don't have all that many more at level 30, there is a problem. While the new player experience in Final Fantasy XIV is not exactly bad, from a purely gameplay perspective, I can't say it's great either. The early leveling of 14 is way too sparse on the amount of abilities you gain, and honestly, most of the combat pre-level 50 feels pretty boring and uninteresting. Which sucks not only when trying to initially level and continue to level alt classes afterwards, but it also kinda shoots the game in the foot for getting new players into the game if they have to play through 50 to 60 hours of JRPG to get to a point where the combat is half decent. On the bright side, players who stick through Realm Reborn now and get up to level 50 on the free trial also get to level from 50 to 60 where the combat starts to feel much better and more involved. But when I played the free trial, it was only up to 35, where if I wasn't invested in the exploration and narrative, I probably would have thrown the game aside. And well, I kinda did for a little while. When I bought the game, I bought the base game and continued up to the end of ARR, but it took me a whole damn month to get there despite playing quite regularly for a few hours. Despite the fact I did enjoy ARR as a standalone experience and I appreciate it even more after finishing Shadowbringers, thanks to the gameplay taking so long to feel interesting and involved, I just kept slowly pushing my way through A Realm Reborn and its patches all the way to the end of 2.4, and that is where I put the game aside for 2.5 months as I felt burnt out on the game just from the gameplay alone. So for 2 months I did other things until I finally picked back up my sub for I don't even remember what reason, and needless to say, past me was in for a treat. Patch 2.5, of course, is where the narrative kicks into overdrive leading into Heavensward, and it never lets its foot off the gas afterwards. Along with that, the gameplay also vastly improved and became far more interesting. And within 2 months, I found myself having returned to the Night Sky to Norvrant and in need of a new chair after barely leaving it for 60 days. While I had already enjoyed the game, after my small break, I came back and it all just snapped into place for me. The story of the game only got better and better, and I was entirely engrossed in it, trying to spend every moment I possibly could logged into the game in order to keep progressing, chasing the next high I knew would be right around the corner. I have a lot of thoughts on the story and the game as a whole, which I go over piece by piece in a series I do on my channel, which I'll link to. There's 4.5 hours of those videos, so if you're looking to fill time and want to hear more about my experience in specific pieces of the game, make sure to check those out. But to conclude my thoughts on the actual leveling side, levels 50 to 80 are fantastic as a leveling experience, and it feels like the player's time is getting rewarded at perfect points, and I really enjoy those 30 levels on the classes I have tried out. But the first 50 levels are actually god-awful. And while that is, I'd say, roughly a quarter of the time spent leveling, it really does need to be overhauled, or else the game might run into a problem attracting new players by that aspect alone, which will probably only get worse with the new abilities Endwalkers adding to the toolkits. And then on top of that, it is 4 JRPGs stitched together, which time-wise is very intimidating. But hey, this isn't a video on how that could be fixed, this is a video on my first 1,000 hours. Overall, despite the slow start to both the story and especially the leveling, the journey to 80 felt like a fantastic single-player game, and in terms of story and experience, it has become my favorite game of all time. And honestly, approaching 14 like a single-player game that has an MMO as post-game content is probably the best way to approach the game. And when it comes to that MMO and your experiences truly become distinct from and shaped by other players is when things truly get interesting. The only problem is, well, dealing with other people. Free companies, the Final Fantasy XIV equivalent of guilds, and the easiest way to get into the world of high-level endgame content by relying on the knowledge of longtime players. A group you can party up with to grind for hours on end, and a group you can make friends within. A group that can shape your experience for better or for worse, and so much more. That is what free companies are. It seems for every good FC, there is 9 that are either dead, toxic as Chernobyl in the late 80s, farm new players for GC turn-in rankings, or are full of small cliques that would just be better off being their own FCs entirely. Upon finishing the MSQ, a player's experience in Final Fantasy XIV is either shaped or at least greatly impacted by the players around them. That is the multiplayer aspect of an MMORPG after all. While many may go through the endgame with nary more social interaction than a wave and a thank you for playing in party chat after a dungeon, for the majority of players who play for the MMO aspect of the game, being able to socialize within the confines of the game is a very important skill for players to develop and can highly affect the endgame experience. Of course, you're not going to get along with everyone that you meet, and you might be in an FC that while you know it isn't that bad, you still find your cursor hanging over the button labeled Leave Free Company, aka me for the past 4 months. Hopefully my FC leader doesn't see this and decide to G-kick me. Actually, that may not be a bad thing. In case you can't tell, I'm conflicted. But hey, that's part of the social aspect of the game just as much as any other. Honestly, the social aspect of Final Fantasy XIV and watching players interact with each other and create their own events has been some of the most fun I've had in the game. Which confuses me because I constantly hear from outside the game that social interactions in MMOs is dead, but it seems to be alive and thriving in 14, something that I am very happy about. I think that the sentiment that socializing in MMOs is gone comes mostly from people that were too scared to join a group, or to adjust to the in-game culture that impacts most, if not all, interactions within the game. And it is a learning curve, that's for certain, and it's one, while I may have not completely conquered, I've at least gotten the hang of in 1,000 hours of playing the game. When I first finished the free trial and bought the game, I joined the FC that some people I had known from Twitch ran. Upon joining, I was looking forward to the social interaction I thought being in an FC would provide, and despite the fact I was only level 40, I was hoping to be at least able to chat with some people in FC chat. But yeah, no, the FC was dead. Like, really dead. I tried logging in at all different times of the day, and when I checked the FC list of 100 or so members, it was only myself and at most 2 others online. And on that list, I saw roughly a quarter of the people in the free company were marked as not having logged in for a solid year. This is where I learned the important lesson of looking into and somewhat vetting FCs, that way you first and foremost don't end up in a dead one. Because you can't even have a bad social interaction if no one is online, let alone a good one. Needless to say, I didn't stick around for long. Once I had reached around the midpoint of Heavensward, I hit the good old Leave FC button and went on my way, focusing solely on the story and being a solo player all the way up to the launch of what I personally think was one of the best additions they could have possibly made to the game, that being Community Finder. Ah yes, the Community Finder, it really is a great tool. FCs can advertise themselves, list their active hours and focuses online alongside many other FCs so that the player can choose which group they would like to join from lots of options, instead of just joining some random shout chat spam group. Sadly, the existence of this tool doesn't stop people from using shout chat to promote, but whatever. While working on this video is the first time I've checked the community finder since it first came out, and I am really happy to see it is still alive and well. And that's because within a week or so of it launching is when I joined my FC after seeing their ad on the community finder board. It's kind of funny how it all worked out actually. I expressed interest in joining them on the site and was told to reach out to them in-game. I remember the interview process pretty well as I was chatting with one of the FC leaders through tells while waiting for my queue of Mount Gulg to pop. It was my first time running the dungeon and I got my ass kicked. But they let me into the FC, and after finishing Shadowbringers and its patches, which was up to 5.3 at that point, I was talking in Discord with them about my interest in doing endgame content, and they brought me along in a learning party for Seed Sacrifice Extreme. Now, this would be a great thing if I hadn't only finished the MSQ literally 3 days prior, so I was not expecting such a jump in difficulty, and I didn't even know my rotation. In fact, it was so bad, I didn't use any spells or Goring Blade, and I had no awareness as to using my support abilities. Yeah, we did 2 full lockouts and we never cleared. Though I was told I wasn't the reason for that. I doubt the sincerity of that statement and assumed they were just trying to be nice, but whatever, I'll take it. The next few months went great. I was hanging out in Discord calls, running maps, and overall having a great time with everyone. Then 5.4 came out and my desire to get into endgame stuff really hit its peak, and I was constantly trying to party up with FC mates to do Emerald EX, and once again, they were nice enough to teach me the fight a few days after it came out, and though I didn't clear for a while after, they were always down to help me. It was great, and I think I'll always remember those months as some of the most fun I've had within the game. I felt like I was truly part of the group, and the FC leader was committed to make sure that cliques didn't form, and was also boosting all the Shadowbringers babies and bringing them into endgame content, bringing me into E9S in a learning party a few weeks after it released, and even buying me full Exarchic Fending gear since I couldn't afford it, and the market was at pretty much an all-time high. I can't stress it enough, things were going great and I was looking forward to log in every day solely because of my FC and the fun I had interacting with them. But then, early January came and I was determined to get into raiding and join a static that my FC was putting together. Of course, I was brand new to raiding in both 14 and MMOs in general, while most of the ones looking to join the static were seasoned vets. So I didn't end up being allowed to join any of them and instead was encouraged to create my own static full of new players, and well, I did. Now, that was a whole fiasco, but the short version is that it died in 2 weeks with only myself and 2 others staying. So we reformed as best as we could and brought in new people to create another new static which died in 3 weeks that time. I mean, it was progress. Maybe the next one I join will last a month, who knows. But after those 2 statics blew up, I was quite embarrassed and kind of stepped away for a small while as I felt that it was solely my fault. People from those dead statics formed or joined new groups within the FC, and I started to feel as if I had lost my place. So I stepped back and threw myself into other things while doing endgame and random party finder groups on the side. And now, 5 months later, it really does feel like I'm on the outs of the whole group, and the FC has grown considerably, and I don't really interact all that much with many of the people. I know at the end of the day, that's all my fault for not continuing on with confidence when the static stuff happened, but I think it's a bit too late to try and salvage things now, and it's probably high time to move on. I just can't bring myself to actually leave for one reason or another. But since then, I've had a lot of great one-off experiences with other players and have many stories to tell from those little escapades in the game. But I'm saving those for some other time. I do want to focus briefly on what exactly it has been like doing endgame stuff as a stranger to that type of content, and how exactly my experience with Party Finder has been in the last 5 months. Yo, Editor Loki here. So while working on this video, I realized that it really is time to move on from my FC. So, I left and am now FC-less. So, any active and recruiting FCs on Excalibur? Please hit me up. I need people to play with. Endgame. The place where many MMORPG players say the game truly starts. Endgame content is intimidating regardless of how you look at it, but as a new player to the genre, it has been quite daunting. There's a lot to learn to first get into the fights and have a semblance of an idea of what the hell is going on, and a whole bunch of other stuff you need to learn if you want to be quote-unquote good at the game. like how to parse well, how to read 14 analysis logs, and a whole bunch of other stuff I'm forgetting right now. And I still barely have an inkling to what the hell parsing means. But once you get into the fights and know your rotation, it's great. Extreme trials are pretty meh in terms of difficulty, but they are easier to learn and hard to screw up once you know them. But they do provide a nice intermediate level challenge between normal and savage. Then there are the savage fights, which are a lot of fun, but I absolutely hate proccing when not in a group of people I at least semi-know. These fights are a good bit more challenging than extremes, and even if you know the fight well, it requires a lot more teamwork and is way easier to screw up and cause a wipe than in extreme trials. Overall, I love the high-end fights in the game as they are a lot of fun to do and provide a good challenge. Of course, I am not including ultimates in that statement, as I am still at the point where I just watch a video of those and, while they look fun, they seem like the perfect way to lose my sanity. But while the fights themselves are fun and great to do with a group of people you know, Party Finder can be a very different experience and has far more factors. First off, PF listings. I mean, just look at this shit. It appears to be a giant bunch of random words and numbers strapped together, yet I can tell what this means and what strategies are involved. What the hell has this game done to me that I understand this gibberish? This is probably one of the biggest reasons people find themselves scared of trying extreme or savage content. This kind of stuff is basically a whole other language that feels completely alien and out of reach when you first reach the endgame as a new player. Well, it was at least like that for me and a few other people I've spoken to. Next, not all party finders are created equal, or anywhere close to equal. You have the silent ones where normally everyone knows the fight and you were just mindlessly farming a fight to try and get mats or a mount, where of course the one guy you brought along who died 4 times wins the role. You can also have groups like this where everything goes well, just losing the roles to a floor tank and maiming gear stands out more in my mind. And then there are also the silent prog groups, which are extremely hit or miss, where you are lucky if you have someone who explains what is going on in party chat, and if you don't, well, good luck clearing that in a timely manner. You also have the groups that you hop into a Discord call, and boy, oh boy, can these be interesting. You have groups where everyone gets along and you learn or farm together, and it feels far more social than just sitting silently and using party chat. I know some people hate them, but I personally love ending up in these groups as you can have really fun conversations with strangers on the other end. Or you can have some mouth-breathing dumb fuck who keeps yelling about all kinds of random stuff both inside the game and out, and is overall really annoying to listen to. I've been in groups with a few people like this, and it is never a pleasant experience. Though it does make for some very fun stories to tell later and gives you moments that you are bound to remember. Some of my favorites being one of them unironically saying "you don't pay my sub" over something really petty, a guy breaking down into tears upon a party wipe before screaming all kinds of horrible things down the mic, we're talking slurs, a lot of slurs, and another guy who started venting all his problems and insecurities randomly mid-Emerald EX pull. The first guy, yeah, that was funny. The second guy, fuck you, asshole. The third guy, I felt kinda bad, but I'm a high schooler, not a therapist. So yeah, endgame content is great. Also, those in the comments about to say that I forgot to speak about Glamour, which is the true endgame. Trust me, I know it is. I just care about my guild too much and am way too cheap to spend over $1 million of it on a fucking t-shirt when it probably looks like crap on Ellison. Plus, I'd rather collect mounts. So that covers a good portion of my experience in over 1,000 hours of playing Final Fantasy XIV. I went over a few things here that I think are generally the first and foremost things to talk about in a video like this, but there are many other aspects of the game I've experienced and have opinions about, and if you guys want to hear those or have specific things you want me to talk about in another video like this, let me know. Overall, I love Final Fantasy XIV, and while it is not a perfect game, it sure as hell is a damn good one that I hope to enjoy for years upon years to come. And I don't doubt that will happen with the current way the game is going, and I only see it getting better and growing more in the future. Really, there's only one thing that could get me to quit the game, and that is if it somehow goes free to play, and in that case, I'm jumping ship, and I'm jumping fast. But that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, it would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe and put a like on the video. I also stream quite regularly over on my Twitch, link to that is in the description. Ugh, I hate shilling. But yeah, as always, my name's Lokidum, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.